My husband stood up at our daughter's wedding dinner, raised his glass, and calmly said, "This is the end for us. I found someone else." For a moment, even the music seemed to forget how to breathe. The chandelier above us trembled slightly, scattering soft gold light across the white tablecloths. The crystal glasses, the faces frozen mid-smile. My daughter's laughter, bright and unguarded, just seconds ago collapsed into a stunned silence. Every eye in the room shifted, first to him, then to me, waiting for something loud, something broken. But I didn't break. I followed his gaze instead. She was sitting across from me, his someone else, young, composed, dressed like she already belonged in the life I had built over decades. She smiled, slow and certain, as if this moment had been rehearsed. And perhaps it had. My fingers tightened slightly around my glass, but my voice, when I leaned toward him, was steady enough to cut through the silence. "Thank you for the warning," I said quietly, because unlike everyone else in that room, I had been waiting for this. I'm not the kind of woman people notice first. For 23 years, I was simply his wife, the quiet one who remembered birthdays, balanced accounts, and made sure the world around him never cracked. While he built his reputation in crowded rooms, I built the life those rooms admired. Our daughter grew up thinking stability was effortless, that love looked like consistency, not spectacle. And I let her believe that. Somewhere along the way, I became background noise in my own marriage. He spoke over me at dinners, introduced me without really seeing me, forgot the small details that once mattered. I noticed when his calls became shorter, when his phone turned face down, when late meetings stopped sounding like work. I didn't ask questions, not because I was blind, but because I was patient. People often mistake silence for weakness. They assume that if you don't react, you don't understand. That if you don't confront, you won't act. He believed that too. What he never realized is that I was the one who knew everything first. The shifts, the lies, the careful distance he thought I wouldn't measure. And while he was busy rewriting his future, I was quietly preparing mine. The change didn't happen all at once. It arrived in small, forgettable moments, the kind people dismiss until they start to form a pattern. He stopped asking how my day had been, but expected me to remember every detail of his. At dinners, his hand no longer reached for mine under the table. Instead, it hovered near his phone, lighting up with messages he would glance at, then quickly silence. Once, I caught a name reflected faintly in his screen, just a first name, unfamiliar. But the way his expression softened told me enough. He began correcting me in front of others, small things, dates, stories, even opinions I had held for years. His tone was always light, almost playful, but precise enough to make me feel edited. And then there were the pauses. When I entered a room, conversations would stall for half a second too long. His colleagues smiled politely, but their eyes flickered with something else. Awareness, maybe even pity. I wasn't part of the joke anymore. I was the detail people carefully stepped around. One evening, at a charity event, I watched him across the room. He was laughing, really laughing, the kind I hadn't heard in years. And standing beside him, just slightly too close, was her. I didn't confront him that night. Instead, I went home, took off my earrings, and sat in the quiet of our bedroom, the same room that had slowly become unfamiliar. His side of the closet was fuller, mine more organized, as if I had been preparing for less without realizing it. That was the moment it settled. Not the betrayal, I had known that already. It was the certainty that he believed I would do nothing, that I would absorb this, like every other quiet dismissal, and remain exactly where he left me. I opened my laptop. At first, it was just small things, reviewing accounts, cross-checking timelines. Then the details began to align. Transfers that didn't match his explanations, shared expenses that weren't shared anymore, decisions made without my knowledge but tied to my name. I didn't rush. I documented everything. Days turned into weeks, and with every piece I gathered, something inside me shifted, not anger, not even sadness, but clarity, clean, precise, and steady. By the time the wedding approached, I wasn't wondering if I would act. I knew exactly when, and more importantly, I knew exactly how. I've always believed that control isn't about force, it's about understanding the structure beneath things. Before I was his wife, I was a financial consultant. Numbers, contracts, fine print. They were my language long before I learned to soften my voice in social rooms. And while he built his empire publicly, I had quietly handled the framework that held it together. So I returned to what I knew. I reviewed every joint account, every shared asset, Every signature that carried both our names, the house, the investments, even portions of his business. He had grown careless, assuming familiarity meant permanence. He forgot that I had been there at the beginning, when everything was still being built, when trust was written into every document. I didn't hide what I was doing. I simply did it in a way he would never notice. Early mornings, late evenings, routine masked as habit. I spoke to a lawyer, discreetly, not for confrontation, but for precision. Every step was verified, every move timed. By the end, nothing was left uncertain. The envelope I prepared wasn't dramatic. No accusations, no emotional letters, just facts, signatures, consequences. Clean, final, and impossible to ignore. The room was still watching him when I stood. He hadn't noticed the shift, yet how attention had already begun to slip from his announcement to my silence. I reached for my clutch, slow and unhurried, and placed the envelope in his hand as if it were an afterthought. "For later," I said softly, but he opened it anyway. Of course he did. At first there was nothing, just the faint crease of confusion between his brows as his eyes moved across the first page. Then his posture changed. His shoulders tightened, his grip on the paper sharpened, and the color drained from his face in a way no one could mistake. A murmur rippled through the room. He flipped to the next page too quickly, then the next, as if speed might change what he was reading. It didn't. His breath hitched, barely audible, but enough. The confident rhythm he had carried into that moment was gone, replaced by something fractured, uncertain. "What is this?" he demanded, but his voice lacked direction. I didn't answer, because everything that needed to be said was already in his hands. Asset transfers finalized, accounts legally separated, authority removed with signatures he had once given without question. Across the table her smile had disappeared, and for the first time that evening, he understood the timing. No one moved at first. Then the whispers began. Soft, careful, but impossible to contain. His colleagues leaned toward one another, piecing together what they had just witnessed. A few of them avoided looking at me entirely, as if eye contact might place them on the wrong side of something irreversible. My daughter was the only one who stood. "Mama?" she said, her voice unsteady, caught between confusion and something deeper. Realization, perhaps. I met her eyes and gave the smallest nod. Not reassurance, not explanation, just truth. Across the table, she shifted back in her chair, the confidence gone from her posture. Whatever future she had imagined a few minutes ago was already unraveling in real time. It's one thing to step into a life. It's another to discover it no longer exists the way you were promised. As for him, he kept reading, as if searching for a version of events that favored him. There wasn't one. Reputation doesn't collapse loudly. It fractures quietly in rooms like this, in front of people who remember exactly what they saw. And that's why this matters. Not because of revenge, but because silence, when used correctly, doesn't erase you. It reveals who was underestimating you all along. I didn't stay to watch the rest. The night air outside was cool, steady, untouched by the tension I'd just left behind. For the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not relief exactly, and not triumph. Balance. I had spent so long adjusting myself to fit a version of life that kept shrinking around me, making space for his ambitions, his voice, his absences. Tonight wasn't about taking anything from him. It was about returning everything to its rightful place. In the weeks that followed, there would be conversations, of course. Legal finalities. Explanations I no longer owed but would give, selectively, on my terms. My daughter would understand in time, not just what happened, but why I chose to wait, to act with clarity instead of chaos. As for him, he would rebuild, or try to, but not with me quietly holding the foundation together. I've learned that dignity isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be seen or demand to be understood. It moves with intention, leaves without hesitation, and never needs to announce its worth. And as I walked away from that night, I realized something simple, something final. I didn't lose anything. I just stopped carrying what was never mine to hold alone.